Hey readers, this is Liz Davidson from Beyond Solitaire Books, and I'm here with my August reading roundup. I read 13 books last month, which I consider to be a very good reading month, and let's just get on with it. Let's see what I read. So my first book of August was Firekeeper's Daughter by Angeline Boulley. I don't always like YA, but this one I really, really liked. It is the story of Donis, who is an 18-year-old woman who is really coming into her own. She is kind of reconciling her identity. She's half white, half native. She is deciding her future, where she's going to go to college, and she's also become embroiled with the FBI because she has agreed to inform and help them bust up a drug ring that is destroying her community. So there's a lot going on in the novel. I think maybe too much, especially because there is a romance plot in there that's kind of a tack on that I didn't think really needed to be there. That said, I really, really, really liked this book. I put it in my classroom. I hope my students are going to read it, and I highly recommend it. It was really good, both in the sense that it was entertaining and good in the sense that you really kind of felt what Donis was going through. The next book I read in August was Revival Season by Monica West. This is the story of a young girl named Miriam, whose father is a Baptist preacher and faith healer, and every summer they go traveling for revival season and he performs miraculous healings, and this is an important part of his reputation with his congregation and also his sense of self-worth. And things haven't been going well in the last couple of years. So the year before, he was questioned in terms of his abilities and had a violent incident. And this summer, the family's hoping that he can kind of redeem himself on multiple levels and things can go back to normal. However, they don't. And in the midst of all of this, Miriam discovers that she has healing powers as well, which she as a woman is not supposed to have. So it's very much about her father crumbling and being violently angry, about her deciding what to do with her own abilities that are threats to the person who essentially controls her life because he's her dad. And there's a lot going on there that is of interest. That said, I don't think that the book explored those parts enough for me. Like, I felt like I wanted more from it. I wanted there to be a more deep, kind of raw sense of realization for Miriam that I'm not really sure happened. The other thing is that in this particular book, you know, it's set in modern times when there would be things like cell phones and viral videos and, you know, internet discussion of anything of this nature, and yet somehow it feels like we're kind of in the 50s and they're just driving around drinking soda pop and not really, you know, being connected to the internet, to the outside world, to all the things that even the most remote churches generally are connected to now. So I found it a little too difficult to suspend my disbelief at times. Next, I read The Confidence Men by Margalit Fox. This is really interesting. So this is nonfiction. It's about two World War I British prisoners of war who are imprisoned in the Ottoman Empire. So they have Turkish jailers, and they manage to convince their jailers to take them out of their prison and eventually get them home. But they do this through cooking up a weird scheme that involves a Ouija board and a spirit that talks to everyone and lots of weird planning. It is just a totally bizarre story. I'm kind of glad I read it just because it's something that if a novelist made it up, I'd say it was too far-fetched, but it's true. And so the story itself is interesting. It also gives you some insights into kind of what spiritualism meant to people at the time, how popular it was, how susceptible people were to it, and, you know, sort of the nature of faith and the need of people who are in the middle of a con to believe both in themselves and they need to get belief from others. That said, there were times where the book dragged a little bit. Both of these men that are being written about wrote memoirs, and I think sometimes the book followed things a little too closely and included too much, because there are definitely moments where it dragged. The other thing is that I would approach this book with caution in the sense that it's not just a fun romp. You also have to be considerate of the fact that these are white British men from another era, and sometimes the way that they talk about or think about their captors is racist and not just the feelings of somebody who's a prisoner of war. And so, you know, you can't go in there and expect like a totally fun romp. There are some heavier things you have to confront as well. So speaking of confronting difficult things, oh man, the next book I read this month was We Cast a Shadow. It's by Maurice Carlos Ruffin, and it is about this kind of like post-racial South where things have moved way backwards in terms of any progress they might have made, and racism is back, Black people are ghettoized and have fewer rights. They are, legally patrolled by the cops in ways that are horrific. And in the midst of it, if you have enough money, you can pay for a surgery that will change your body and make you white. And so the main character of this book is a lawyer. He's nameless, but he's obsessed with the idea of turning his mixed race son from a mixed race person into a white person. And of course, his son has his own feelings about that the narrator doesn't fully reveal to you. Although by the end, you're able to pick them up because he's no longer a child, he's an adult. And you can really see the impact of the way the father has been on the son. So I thought this book was interesting on a number of levels. One is it's just brutal. Like, it is not a comfortable read. I thought I was going to DNF it a couple times, except that it was for a book club, because the way that the lawyer debases himself for his corporation, which is run by white people who very clearly mistreat him, it's just so agonizing to read about. And it's very frustrating. It's very painful. And, it's one of those things that you have to be willing to tolerate in order to continue. That said, the book really brought up a lot of interesting things, not only about race, which, it's important to talk about that in this country. There were some really interesting scenes where, the main character disagrees with his white wife about the upbringing of their son and tells her that, his view should take precedence because she could never understand how it feels to be him. It strikes so many true notes, and yet what he's doing to his son is so wrong. And then, of course, his obsession with his son's body was really fascinating. It was painful to read, but it was really fascinating in part because I've never read about body obsession like this between a father and a son before. Typically that would show up in a plot between a mother and a daughter. And so I thought that was really an interesting take. And then, of course, by the end, you get more of a sense of what the son, Nigel, thinks about everything and, wanting to know how he's going to respond to his father after everything they've been through is probably the most interesting and rewarding part of the book. And I was glad to get there, even though this book doesn't have a happy ending. It's not really a happy book, but it was worth the thoughts that it gave me and getting to the end and kind of seeing the kids really are all right. The next read of the month was just a quick one. It was called Fear, Essential Wisdom for Getting Through the Storm. It's by Thich, Nhat, Hanh. And, I occasionally like to read books about mindfulness. I'm a very anxious person. I'm always looking for ways to kind of refocus myself and think about what's really important in my life. And I thought this book would be helpful. There were things that were quite helpful about it. At the same time, it also didn't work for me on a number of levels. Like, there were a lot of weird potential dialogues you could have with your inner child that just weren't doing it for me. And also, Thich Nhat Hanh makes a lot of suggestions for, forming a community. And I'm not really interested in joining a spiritual community of any variety at the moment, which makes things a little bit different. So the next book I read in August was one I was really looking forward to, and I will admit I was disappointed, and that was The Vixen by Francine Prose. So The Vixen is about a young man who's just graduated from Harvard. He feels like he's supposed to be having a bright future, but kind of he isn't. So he gets a job at a publisher, and he's given the distasteful task of basically editing a bodice ripper about Julius and Ethel Rosenberg. And what complicates this is that he's Jewish. We're all still in the middle of the Red Scare at the time of this book, and his mother knew Ethel Rosenberg when she was younger and is very crushed by her execution. So there's a lot of interesting elements to the book, but at the same time, I just can't imagine anybody caring that much about a tangential childhood friendship with Ethel Rosenberg to turn this into that sort of ethical dilemma that it became in the course of the book. Simon Putnam, the main character, is not particularly likable. And also there's a strange twist at the end that I really didn't buy. I thought it was kind of goofy. So the book is beautifully written, and Francine Prose does a great job of evoking, Coney Island at this time period, and her writing is really, really good. The plot of this particular book, meh. I would read another book by her, but I'm pretty sure this was the wrong place to start. After that, I had a surprise hit for me, which is Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir. So I actually had no intention of reading this book, but then one of my students was obsessed with it. And, when my students tell me they really like something, I will typically read it. So I started it, and I was hooked within moments. I devoured this book. It was wildly entertaining. I don't normally read sci-fi, although I did like The Martian. I thought that this one was maybe not as good as The Martian, but Project Hail Mary was super good. It's about a guy who wakes up from a coma on a spaceship with no memory of who he is or why he's there or what he's supposed to do, and things progress from there. The progress is awesome and a wild ride. It's just fun. I would recommend this one to pretty much anybody. It was really enjoyable. After that, I read The Inheritance of Orquídea Divina by Zoraida Córdova, and it was my book of the month pick. It's basically about this sort of mystical witch grandmother who is dying, and she calls her family home to claim their inheritance. But then weird and dangerous things start to happen, and they end up solving an old family mystery. The book was good. There were parts where I thought it kind of dragged a little bit, and there were aspects of the world building that just didn't do it for me. At the same time, I actually really liked the grandmother character, and I really enjoyed learning about her life and reading about what happened with her kids. So it was enjoyable. It wasn't amazing. Glad I read it. After that, I read a book I didn't expect to like as much as I did. I enjoy thrillers, but they don't normally capture me in a big way. But I really liked Not a Happy Family by Shari Lapena. I read the crap out of this book. It's basically about these rich jerks who are murdered, and it's pretty apparent that one of their kids did it, and the question is which one. And I really liked watching her make it look like it could have been any of them, and, you know, showing them cracking under the pressure, the stress, and also really wanting their money, and they all had compelling reasons to want money. There were some issues with the inheritance that, like, kind of come up throughout the book. It was really, really fun. It was like an afternoon read. That thing was gone. And so I actually liked it so much that I picked up another Shari Lapena book, which we'll talk about in just a second. Because after that, I made a mistake. And my mistake was that I read Falling by T.J. Newman. It's definitely the worst book I read this month. I gave it 2 stars because, like, it was entertaining. But man, it was not entertaining in a way that I'm, like, really proud to have read. And I say that being completely fine with the fact that I read Ice Planet Barbarians. So, Falling, you know, have you ever read, like, a novelization of a movie? Falling is, like, the novelization of a movie, except that they're actually making a movie of this book. The characters are really shallow. It was very much like, yeah, America, families, baseball. You know, it was just, you know, very one-dimensional. And the things that happened in the book were so laughably improbable that I found myself, like, kind of snickering at points that were clearly supposed to be serious. And and then, you know, honestly, I really didn't like the villain in this particular one. So basically the premise of this book is that it is about a plane hijacking where a pilot is given a choice between crashing the plane in an unknown location or having his family murdered by a terrorist who's on the ground. And so, like, everything emerges from this dramatic choice. And then the bad guys are... Okay, so if you really want no spoilers, just skip up a couple seconds. I'll put, like, a little thing up here. The bad guys are Kurds. And I really didn't appreciate that. It comes up really soon in the book. It's not really a spoiler in my opinion, but I just really thought that was a bad choice in terms of who to crap on and who to present as a villain. The Kurds have it hard enough, and the reasoning for these ones to do what they did was shallow at best. So, on Falling by T.J. Newman, I will probably not pick up another T.J. Newman book. I know that she's got huge hype. She's got a deal for another book in the works. I would not bother. Give it a pass. But then after that, I read Someone We Know, which is another Shari Lapena, like, one-day devouring thriller. And this one was about these parents who find out that their son has been breaking into people's houses and hacking into their computers because it gives him a thrill. And on top of that, there has been a murder in the neighborhood. And, you know, as the police investigate, all these neighborhood secrets start to come out, and nobody can keep it in their pants, and everybody has something dark that they don't want everybody to know about, and if nobody wants to tell the cops anything because they did something embarrassing, even if it wasn't part of the murder, and basically everything ends up being very enjoyable if you want to read a whole bunch of gossip but not actually hurt anyone, which is what I think books like this are for, because it was juicy. And then my last 2 books of the month were probably my most interesting. The first one I actually never expected to pick up, but somebody recommended it to me and I decided to give it a try, and it was Milkfed by Melissa Broder. This is a very strange book. I'm actually going to dedicate a fuller review video to it, but it is essentially about this an unhappy woman. She works for a talent agency at a job she hates. She doesn't enjoy her life at all because she basically has an eating disorder and obsessively counts her calories in her food. If eating disorders and fat phobia are triggers for you, I do not recommend this book. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200 because reading about this experience from the point of view of this character is claustrophobic for me, and I do not have an eating disorder. So, be warned. But anyway, she's got mom issues because it's her mother who, you know, convinced her of the great value of thinness. And over the course of the book, she meets an Orthodox Jewish woman who helps to run her favorite frozen yogurt place and who is unapologetically fat and seems to like herself, love her family, and live a good life. And so, you know, Rachel, who is our unhappy skinny woman, falls for and really lusts after this this Orthodox Jewish woman who runs the yogurt store. And they have an affair that brings up all kinds of weird issues about heritage because they're both Jewish, but at different intensity levels. It's all about, it brings up issues of sexuality, of desire and fear over our bodies and our sexualities. And it was a fascinating read. I really recommend it if you want something to make you think, but if, you know, food issues and fat phobia freak you out, you might want to give this one a pass. I thought it was great. And then my last book of the month, I've actually had sitting on the shelf forever, and it's Piranesi by Susanna Clarke. I did not like Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. I did not know how I was going to feel about Piranesi, but I just really felt compelled to give it a chance, and I'm glad I did. It is about a man who lives in this house that is mostly statues and like an ocean that floods up from the basement of the house. And there are a couple of other living beings that he knows. There are some dead people in the house, and he's sort of cataloging this world that he lives in what he feels is a scientific way. And then there are complications. And that's all I'll say because I don't want to ruin anything. But I thought it was really, really good. I was very charmed by the main character. The fantastical elements are really good. If you enjoy very thoughtful literature with a sense of whimsy, I think Piranesi might be for you. I got a big kick out of it, actually, and I'm still thinking about the book. It's one of the ones, so normally when I read a book, I just toss it on the trade pile. I don't keep most books that I read, but this one I'm going to keep around for a while in case I want to reread it because I found it fascinating. And it's for this year's Women's Prize in Fiction, so I would definitely recommend that one for both awards interest and because I thought it was quite good. So those are the 13 books I read in August. I will be back in a month with whatever I read in September, but don't worry, I've got some more videos planned between now and then. Thanks so much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and happy reading.